Omega candles are coming. I just can't see it not happening. I just don't see us hovering at 80, 90, 100. I think we'll see a very violent move to the upside, and then suddenly retail is going to be interested because now it's FOMO season, and retail seems to only really understand FOMO. My prediction is we'll see 1 million in 2025. If not, then 2026. But it's coming very soon. It just has to do with all of the demand and not enough supply. And it hasn't reconciled yet. If it was going up gradually, then you can kind of visualize that the steam is being let out of the pot. It's kind of depressurizing a bit. But we're not seeing that. We're kind of hovering around at 84, accumulations at 84-ish. It doesn't seem to compute. And when things don't compute, then they reconcile very quickly. So it is that gradually, then suddenly. So maybe it's end of the year. I don't know, but it's going to reconcile, and it's going to reconcile in a very violent way. The intent to acquire 3 million some odd Bitcoin from Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act, coupled with the BitBond proposal, it's probably not really felt or understood yet, but it will be felt and it will be understood. But 3 million Bitcoin is something like 14, 15% of supply. If you factor in lost coins, it goes up to something like 19%. And that's just from one country. So there's just not enough Bitcoin to go around. And it's also a problem that countries don't yet understand, that there is a hard limit, because everyone's been living in fiat land for so long, where if you need money, it just materializes. If you make a mistake, you can undo your mistake by printing some more money to, patch it over. But there's just this absolute limit with Bitcoin that I don't think fully registers for normal people, retail investors, and for politicians and leaders of countries. But this is all going to reconcile, and it's going to reconcile very quickly. And you have at the same time this nation state adoption starting to move forward, MicroStrategy trying to buy more. The ETFs are buying more. And I think MicroStrategy alone has taken off two times, or maybe close to 3 times the amount of supply that will be mined in all of 2025. So it just takes time for people to figure things out. I wrote an article on Twitter or on X about this, and it's like people were kind of expecting the executive order calling for the creation of the SPR, or creating the SPR, would kind of kick things off right away. But I think your average man on the street doesn't have any idea what's going on. They're not following the developments. They're not following the news. They're not aware of anything. I think fund managers are probably more aware, but it takes time for them to also move and get things going, and to set up the processes that allow them to buy. And that's why I think ETFs, MicroStrategy, and MicroStrategy derivatives are sort of a shortcut path to that. And that can allow people to get in much faster. But in general, it takes a lot of time to gear up and pass the laws that are needed to start the whole process. And unfortunately, most of the world is waiting for things to signify that it is time, or actually a better way to say it, to signify it's too late, because that's the point at which there is no career risk. And I think Harry was mentioning something like that, right? Like there is this concept of career risk, which is if you do something with Bitcoin, then you're at risk. But the inverse is starting to become the new norm, which is if you don't do something with Bitcoin, your career is at risk. But yeah, it takes them a lot of time to kind of get there. And I think it's just a slow process. And the real price of Bitcoin is probably something like 200,000 right now, but we're not even there yet. And I believe it's just a matter of people reconciling that, the reality of what's happening with the actual price. And usually that happens in a very violent manner when there's such a big disconnect. But right now you see like a lot of analysts, and they're all kind of mid-curve. It's always like this. Like when things happen in a certain way, they kind of say it's going to keep happening in this way. So like when we dipped to 70 something, I saw a lot of people saying, okay, we're going to go to 50. So we just had a big drawdown of 30 some odd percent, or 30%. And now your mid-curve take is we're going to go lower, right? Because you're fearful, and you can't see anything past your own fear. And right now we're kind of like in this period of consolidation crab market. and I saw some new mid curve takes, which is we'll have 8 to 12 months of more sideways chop. I mean, that's just not reading the macroeconomic trends or reading anything. That's just your own personal bias and fear speaking.
Lots of mid curvers. And again, I think that your average retail individual is still so asleep. I've got so few of I had a little bit in the post 100K of like, hey, you still into that Bitcoin thing? Kind of curious and everything, but it's been a friggin' ghost town. Despite the fact that, I mean, like we feel kind of about 80 plus K, which is wild to me. But nonetheless, like, yeah, retail is completely asleep. They have I mean, kind of obviously, but nonetheless.
Like the strategic Bitcoin reserve is one of the most bullish things I've seen in my entire time in Bitcoin. And like, yeah, there's a big difference between how normies perceive it and how Bitcoiners perceive it, because Bitcoiners have been waiting for things like this to start happening for the better part of a decade, even longer than that. And I, to me, when I saw it happen, and then I saw the way it sort of, the reception to it was kind of like, huh, what? Like Rachel Maddow was on her show analogizing it to a Beanie Baby reserve, right? Like, what do we need stupid Beanie Babies for, right? It reminded me of a Sputnik moment, right? Like when Sputnik flew overhead, that was a really big deal. But the American public's perception of it was, back at that time in the what would it have been? Early 1960s, late 1950s. The government told everybody on the radio and television to go out tonight and look at Sputnik, everybody. It's going to be amazing, whatever. And then what the average person in America saw was they looked up and there was this like little light that went above their head for a fraction of a second. And they all just turned to each other like, that's it? That's what we're supposed to be excited about or whatever. But obviously, this was a very big deal, because for millions of years, humanity had been staring up at the heavens, and there had been separation between us and it, the celestial bodies. And now we had pierced the veil, and our technological supremacy was growing, and rocketry was going from this thing that was like, sort of a niche hobbyist activity to, within 10 years, it was going to put a man on the moon. We were going to have ICBMs. It was going to be a core part of our national strategic defense and infrastructure, et cetera. So like, it was a really, really big moment. And what was interesting is there was a public disconnect where the public didn't understand what was going on at all, but every government around the world immediately understood what had just happened. And I think that's the same thing. So Sputnik kicked off the space race. I think the SBR just kicked off the SAT race. And you now realize that Bitcoin is no longer optional. You are forced into the Bitcoin paradigm, just like rocketry, advanced rocketry was no longer optional after Sputnik. You are now forced into this. Otherwise, you don't want your enemies to own the future, right? And so the minute the SBR got signed, every central bank head, every finance minister, every president in the world had this dossier dropped on their desk that said Bitcoin is strictly limited to 21 million. There will never be any more Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital gold. Like, it had all these amazing things in it. So yeah, I mean, like, fuck, it's really it's really bullish, and it's kind of crazy to me that people are just like, oh, it's just like whatever. It's like ceremonial. It's like a token SBR. No, it's a real SBR. There's going to be incremental new buying attached to it. Anybody who's saying the opposite is fully out to lunch or delusional or doesn't understand what's happening. I saw some real bad takes about that on the internet. So like, yeah, man, this is it's a big fucking deal. I don't know how to get this. This is a pre and post moment. That's how big of a deal this is. So if you're not bullish about this, you are asleep. Your head is in the sand.
The people that have been around for a while have always been bullish. Like, Bitcoin is just so transformational that it is hard to disregard it in any way whatsoever. And if you really understand it, I think you see the transformation potential, which is now coming to light and being more obvious to everyone else. But I guess right now, there are so many factors that right now you have I think the real beginnings of nation state adoption. So while El Salvador did become the first Bitcoin country, it is still very small relative to the US and many other countries. So I think the impact was not as profound because people are kind of writing it off. Like, okay, a small country is doing something. But with the US really going all in with the SBR, with the talk of their version of Bitcoin bonds, the Bit bonds, and with all the nation state mining, I think, like again, I talked about earlier, the calculus has completely changed. It's just a different equation completely now. So in my view, the ETFs were a critical unlock factor, and that was removing the blockage from TradFi money flowing into Bitcoin. Pre-ETF, you always had run-ups, and the run-ups would kind of fizzle out because the exchanges would be overloaded. They couldn't KYC and onboard fast enough. But with ETFs, there is no barrier now. The portal to TradFi capital is wide open. And you already see people taking advantage of that, like entities such as central banks and pension funds that are buying either ETFs or like MicroStrategy. So the exposure to Bitcoin is just a click now. It's like in your Robinhood trading account or whatever you want. So there is no barrier to capital inflow. Now, with the SBR, you have this sort of endorsement from the most powerful country on the planet so far. And that is really big. Like Hodl was saying, all these politicians, they're getting this dossier now saying, Bitcoin is going to be put into a reserve and they're going to buy more. And there are all these things happening. So they kind of have to take action. And we talked about it earlier. The career risk is just gone now. And it's actually inverted that you have to have some sort of Bitcoin strategy or else you're putting national security at risk. And I think that is starting to play out because some of the conversations that we've been having at Jan 3 have accelerated. We've had a lot of conversations and they're kind of slow. They're waiting for this signal to say it's okay, which is kind of unfortunate when you think about it, because the countries that need Bitcoin the most to kind of catch up or get out of debt, they are probably the least willing to do something. But now I think with the US telegraphing intentions to do a lot of Bitcoin related activities and accumulation, it's changed a lot. So some timetables have been moved up. Some conversations that we're talking about doing something in 2026, they moved it up a year. I think they'll keep moving it up as things progress. But the general sentiment is there is some feeling of urgency now.